This is great. All right, we are right on time. So I want to go ahead and honor your time and get started. Let's go ahead and get into GoGuardian Teacher 101. So an introduction to using GoGuardian Teacher. My name is Mary Ellen. I'm one of the product trainers for GoGuardian. I started out my career as a classroom teacher. I taught in both elementary and middle school. I also worked as a librarian in pre-K all the way up to seniors in high school. So I really enjoyed my time as librarian and made the transition to technology specialist. So I was managing hardware, deploying software, providing support and training for all of those resources. And I'm really happy to be here to share GoGuardian Teacher with all of you today. Now, my objective for this training is to give you an overview of GoGuardian, let you know what it can do with you, for your students. I want you to feel confident and comfortable. If you are somebody that does have access to GoGuardian, I want you to feel like you are ready to start using these different features with your students. Now, I am going to go through and show you what GoGuardian can do in my demo environment. And I'm going to give you some use cases for the different features that I'm showing you to hopefully get you to start thinking about the ways you might like to use these features with your students in your classes. Now, I do have a document I want to share with all of you. I have a notes document right here that I'm going to drop into the chat. When you click on that link in the chat, it's going to open in template preview. If you want your own copy of this notes document, just click on Use Template in the top right corner. You'll have your own copy. You're going to be able to edit it if you want to add more notes to it. There are hyperlinks to help center articles and video resources here on this notes document. So that is available to you in the chat. And let's go ahead and get into our agenda. First, I'm going to talk to you about what GoGuardian is and how it works. Then we'll get into that demo environment where I'm going to be able to show you how to get your classes set up or created, how to start a session or start monitoring students. We have different commands that we can use to communicate with our students or redirect them. We have reporting options, some data that's being collected as you're running those sessions. And then we'll definitely have time for Q&A. So I've got the chat available. If you have questions, you can put those questions in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that as we're going along. We also will have time at the end, and I'll stop periodically to check in and see if there's any questions. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. Oh, that link again? Yes, definitely. There you go. So the document, the notes document link is in the chat again. For those of you that just joined us, welcome. Now, if you are new to GoGuardian or you're not sure exactly how it works and what it does, this is a tool to help educators facilitate online learning, students that are using devices. We want you to be able to support those students and to help them focus during their class time. Now, this is done through the deployment of 2 Chrome extensions that are pushed out to student accounts by your IT or your administrators. So as a classroom teacher, you don't have to worry about deploying this out to your student accounts. That's going to be taken care of for you. As a classroom teacher, and I know a few people just joined, so I'm going to push that notes document out one more time. So as a classroom teacher, you will have a GoGuardian Teacher account that you will sign into to be able to monitor your students. Now, the really nice thing is your students are not signing into or out of GoGuardian. They're going to sign into their school-issued account as they normally do. And with those extensions in place, you're going to have visibility into what they're browsing, as well as the ability to take action or redirect those students. So really nice, very streamlined for both you and your students. Now, let me show you how this works. I'm going to go into our demo environment, and I just want to let you know that you're going to see some students that are actively browsing in my classes. None of these are real students. They are all computer-generated students that are programmed to continuously browse online. And some of them are programmed to browse things that are off task or inappropriate. And that is by design so that I'm able to show you some different features here in GoGuardian. So no student privacy issues. Again, none of these are real students. So I am already signed into GoGuardian. If you want to sign into your account, if you have a GoGuardian Teacher account and you want to sign in, you can do that, but you don't have to. And here in just a minute, I'm going to direct you to a sandbox environment where you can try some of these things out if you don't have a GoGuardian account to sign into. So by all means, you don't have to sign into your account, but if you have one and you would like to sign into it, the URL is in the chat. When you sign into GoGuardian, you land on your classroom page. And if you're a brand new user, you are going to see a blank page here. So don't let that throw you. You will have to get your classes set up in GoGuardian, but we make it super easy. Now, depending on your organization, you may be syncing with Clever or ClassLink. If you are, then you are going to head over to Pending. Here under that classroom heading, under Pending, this is where you're going to see those Clever or ClassLink classes that have been synced over. And it's going to look something like this. So under Pending, I've got 2 classes, and I have the option to accept or decline those classes. Accepting them is going to move them to my active classroom page. Declining them just moves them to archived. I can always go into archived and get those classes if I need them. So that is super simple. If you're using that integration with Clever or ClassLink, you'll head over to Pending, click on those class tabs, and bring them into your active classroom area. Now, another nice thing about syncing is those class rosters are built in, so you don't have to worry about maintaining class rosters. Your second option is a Google Classroom sync. So if you are using Google Classroom, you're going to set up your Google Classrooms. Your students will join those Google Classrooms, or you will have those students on that class roster. Then you'll click on Import Google Classroom. You will select any Google Classrooms you want to bring over and import that classroom. You'll get a success message here in the top right. Your student roster will be listed here. I don't actually have students in this classroom, but you would see that student roster listed. And on your classroom page, you're going to see that Google Classroom. You'll know it's a Google Classroom sync because you're going to see that Google logo in the top left corner. So super easy there as well. The nice thing about that is you are going to maintain your class roster in Google Classroom. And Google and GoGuardian are going to sync every hour to update those class rosters for you. Now, if you're not using Clever, ClassLink, or Google Classroom, not a problem. You can use this Add Classroom button here in the top right corner. This is also a nice option if you have a group of students that you want to monitor that are not reflected in those synced classrooms. So for me, I always used to create a classroom for my tutorial group because I had students from several different classes that came to me for tutorials. So all you need to do is click on Add Classroom and give that classroom a name. The rest of this is optional, and you'll click on Add Classroom. Now, when you manually create a classroom, you do have to manually create that student roster, and you have 3 options for doing this. First, you can give your students a code. Direct them to the Enroll GoGuardian URL. They'll type in the code. They will be on your class roster. Your second option is for you to set up that class roster by entering individual student emails. Click on Add Students after you've added all of those emails, and you're going to see that student roster populate right here. Your third option, if you have a spreadsheet that contains your student email addresses, make sure to move those email addresses to the first column of your spreadsheet. Save that spreadsheet as a CSV file, and then upload that file right here to bring over that entire list of students all at once onto your class roster. Now I have a tutorial group class that I created by using that Add Classroom button right here on my Classrooms page. If students join that class or leave that class, I'll head up to the settings, go to add students, and I can come up here, add additional students or remove students as needed. Last but not least, when you're setting up your classes, you do have the option to add a co-teacher. So if there's another staff member that supports students in your class, or in the case of my tutorial group, there is another teacher that runs the tutorials with me, I can go into the settings and choose add co-teacher, and I can add another teacher to this teacher roster. I go up here to the top right, click on that green add teacher button, and then I can search for my co-teacher by name or by email address. Select them, and then from the drop down, I'm going to choose the level of access I want that co-teacher to have. We have 3 options here, and there is a Help Center article hidden right under this I for information, and there is a really nice chart on here that's going to outline each of those different roles. Here we go. So we've got our helper, teacher, and owner. You can see what each of those roles can and cannot do. When you've determined the most appropriate level of access for your co-teacher, you can head back over, select that role, and add that co-teacher. I'll always know who has access to my classes. And after I add a co-teacher, that person will now have this class tile on their classroom page. So Kayla, my co-teacher, will now have this tutorial group tile on their classroom page. Either of us will be able to start that class. Both of us will be able to jump in and monitor those students. All right, any questions about setting up classes?
No.
Yes, so I could add my CC class since they are separate from my regular class. Yes, so if you have another class you want to add separate from your regular class or one of these other classes, then you will just go up to add classroom and manually create any additional classrooms that you need. Or would I have to make one whole new class to be able to see them all at the same time? So it depends. Once you have your classes set up, if you are syncing, then that student roster comes from that classroom that you synced over. So if you sync from Google Classroom, it's pulling that Google Classroom roster. If you're syncing from Clever or ClassLink, it's going to pull those rosters. If you need a different grouping of students, you can go to Add Classroom and you can manually set up that class roster to contain the students that you need to monitor. So if they're rostered separately in Clever, I know that happened with my classes. Our students that were identified as 504 were on a separate roster in Clever than my regular ed students because of the course numbers. So what I had to do was create a classroom manually and build it with both of those rosters in that class. So I would suggest grabbing the spreadsheet because you can usually download a spreadsheet from Clever. I was able to do that from my student information system and then use that CSV file upload to get that whole list of students in there. All right, so now that we've got our classes set up, let's talk about monitoring students. When you're ready to monitor one of your classes, you are going to find that tile on your classroom page. So obviously, I've got a lot of classes set up. If you are a self-contained classroom, you may just have one classroom. So you're not doing anything wrong if you only have one classroom, but I've got a lot. And I'm going to say that it's time for math class. So I'm going to head over to this math tile. Right here in the center, I do have the option to start class with chat on or off. So I'm going to leave that off and we're going to talk about the chat here in just a few minutes. Right below the chat, there is a drop down and this is where I set the duration. So how long do I want to monitor this group of students or how long is this class session? I can choose a set number of minutes or I can choose a custom end time on the clock. Whatever works best for you. Again, my self-contained classroom teachers will sometimes set the custom end time for the end of the day. It can be any time within an 8-hour time frame. So you can't run a session more than 8 hours. Hopefully your school day is not going to be more than 8 hours. I'm going to leave this one at 45 minutes. This is a 45-minute class session, and click right here on Start Class. Now, when I start my class, my screen changes. I am now in this third block math class. I set the duration for 45 minutes, so I can see I've got 45 minutes remaining. Update time is going to allow me to add time to this class session. So if I need to extend that, I can. I can also come down here and set a new ending time on the clock and update that session. If your session is going to end early, maybe we are done using our devices, we're putting those away before that time runs out, I can click up here on End Session and stop collecting that browsing data, stop monitoring what my students are browsing. Now down here in the larger part of my screen, I see tiles. Each of these tiles represents a student on my roster. So remember that student roster? Well, here they are as tiles on my screen. And if the student is active, if they are signed in to their school issued account, I'm going to see that activity when I start my class. So we just started class. They're all coming to me from different classes. So my students are all on different websites, and I can see up at the top the name of the student. The large image is showing me what that student is currently actively browsing. Right below that, I can see the title of the website as well as a hyperlink to that website. So I can click right here and jump into that website if I need to check out what they're browsing. Then across the bottom, I can see some icons. Now, these icons across the bottom represent other tabs the student has open in the background. If I hover over a tab, and this is something that my student does not need to have open, I do have a close this tab button, so I immediately can take action, redirect my students away from a distracting website, and close that tab out. I get that confirmation in the top right corner that I've closed that tab for that student. All right, now when I click and expand out my student tiles, I'm going to have some other commands that I can use on my students. So over here on the right, you're going to see that close option here as well. I can close out any tab the student has open, including their active browsing tab. I also have some tabs across, or some commands across the bottom. Now, starting from the left, we have the ability to exclude a student. This means I no longer want to monitor what that student's browsing during my class session. I would probably use this if the student is going to leave my class. Maybe they're going to do a makeup test with another teacher, or they're doing some work with a counselor or a specialist, and I don't want to interfere with that. I can click here and exclude them. Click on exclude, and that student tile has disappeared. Hasn't disappeared entirely. They are still on my class roster, so I can see that student tile right down here at the bottom. When they come back to my class, I can click right on re-include, and again, pick up monitoring what that student is browsing. All right, what if a student is using their personal computer? Do you have the ability to monitor what they're browsing? So that depends on how your organization has GoGuardian Teacher set up. Those extensions are deployed out to student accounts. They're not deployed to devices. So when the student logs in using an internet-connected device, when they're logged in with that account that has those extensions, you can see what they're browsing depending on how your organization has things set up. Some organizations choose to only allow teachers to monitor students on Chromebook devices. So that would be something, check with the GoGuardian administrator for your organization and see how they have things set up. So it is possible to see students on other devices, on MacBooks, on PCs, on laptops, as well as on Chromebooks. Great wondering there. All right, so let's go ahead and expand out that tile one more time. We just looked at exclude student. The next option we have is to open a new tab. So we already closed a tab. Maybe the student needs a new tab opened. I can click on open new tab and I can type in or paste in a URL right down here and click open tab. Or I can go to that drop-down menu, and this is going to show me tabs I've recently opened for students in this class. If the tab they need is here, so maybe they need this Khan Academy, I can open that up. And I am redirecting that student. That tab is now going to become their active browsing tab. And the other tab was just pushed down on the list of other tabs they have open. All right, next up, to the right of open new tab, we do have the ability to lock the student's device or disable browsing for that student. When you click on lock device, you do have the ability to message that student. So maybe my class is working pretty independently. I don't want to disturb the class by calling up Brandon in front of the class. So I can message them. I can say, come see me. And maybe it's time for small group. So they were busy working. They didn't realize that their small group had come up. So I can say, come see me. It's time for small group. I can click on lock screen. Brandon is going to see that their device has been disabled by the teacher. They're also going to see that message, come to small group, so they can get up, come over to the small group area. We can work together. When it's time for them to get back to work on their devices, I can click unlock right here or down at the bottom to let them get back to browsing. To the right of that is our screenshot option. Clicking on that one time is going to capture a screenshot of whatever that student is currently browsing. So if they're doing some exemplary work and you want to document it, you can grab that screenshot. And next we have annotate. Annotate is going to allow you to use these colored dots on the student screen. It's a really nice way to direct that student's attention to a particular point on their device. So maybe the student is not quite sure what to do, and I want them to head over to Google Classroom. I can drop that annotation on their screen. They're going to see it, and I can say, Brandon, you're going to click right up there where it says Google Classroom. They'll know where to click, and they'll be able to get where they need to be. All right, those are the commands that I can use on an individual student. But we also have commands we can use on multiple students or the entire class. Now, there was a question, if you've excluded a student and then you open a tab for everyone, it won't open for the excluded student. That is correct. When you've excluded them, you are not monitoring them and you are not taking action on that student. So yes, excluding a student means if you use a command on the entire class, that student is excluded. All right, so those are the commands we can use on an individual student. But here in the top left corner, there is a checkbox. When you click on that checkbox, it's going to select all of the students in the class. Okay, let me back up 1 second. How do you take a screenshot again? I'm going to click on expand out that student tile, and that screenshot option is right down here in our command bar. Pause one more time. I see a lot of my students disabling GoGuardian. How are they able to do that? What can I do? Again, we do have a specific set of instructions for setting up GoGuardian in your organization. So you would need to get with the person that manages GoGuardian for your organization and see how it's set up. It really depends. The most secure setup is through using school-issued Chromebooks. But if you're using other devices, there are other things that need to be set up. Students should not have the ability to remove extensions that have been deployed. So again, that is something that your organization will need to look into in the Google Admin Console to make sure students don't have the ability to remove extensions. So work with your team that sets up GoGuardian for your organization. And if they have any questions, they can reach out to our support team. Yes, they could be logged into a personal account, but again, your organization can prevent students from logging into personal accounts. Yeah. All right. Lots of great questions. I know that you came here wanting answers, so I'm happy to help you out. So keep those questions coming. All right, I'm going to go ahead and check this box again here in the top left corner. And you're going to see every student now has a check mark in the top left corner. I have selected all of the students that are active in my session. So I've selected 18 students. And across the bottom, I've got commands that I can use on all of those students at one time. So for me, this was a huge time saver, getting all of my students' attention. Now, if I wanted to do direct instruction, my students have devices. It really helped me out by being able to lock those devices. I can leave a message in there, eyes on me, and I am locking those devices, disabling browsing for all of my students at the same time. I can do my direct instruction, work through some examples, explain the assignment, and when I'm ready to let them get started, I can unlock devices individually by clicking on those student tiles, or I can check that box in the top left corner one more time to select all of my students and unlock their devices all at once. This is also great if you're transitioning. You can click that box and open a new tab for everybody. So in those instructions, I might have said, we are all going to work on this Khan Academy assignment. Here is my website. I can open that tab for all of my students at the same time. So everybody is exactly where they need to be to get started. Now, let's say I need to differentiate. I've got a couple of students that have a modified assignment. They're going to be working on something different. I can select those students by using the checkbox in the top left corner of the student tile to individually select students. So I've selected 4, get that confirmation right down here, 4 students selected. And now I can use a command on just those students. So they have a modified assignment. I'm going to go to open new tab, and I'm going to redirect those students to the website that they need to be on for their modified assignment. And that website is going to open up just for those 4 students that I selected. All right. Lots of great use cases for those commands on individual students, multiple students, or the entire class. Now, let's talk about our communication features. Right up here at the top, I mentioned this at the beginning. When you start your class, you can start your class with the chat on or off. I started with the chat off. Now that my students are working independently, I want to turn that chat on so that if they have questions, they can reach out to me and ask those questions. When I turn that chat on, the chat icon on each of my student tiles turns a dark navy blue. The students are going to see a new tab open up. That is their chat tab. And down here in the lower right-hand corner, I get this chat icon opened up down here as well. From here, if I want to reach out to a student through chat, I can select that student by clicking on their chat icon. It expands out that student tile. And over here on the right-hand side, I've got that chat window open. Maybe I want to check in with Brandon, make sure they understand what they need to do. I can type in my message. We even have emojis we can add, and I can send that out. When I send out the message, the student is going to get a notification that their teacher has sent a message. They can open up and view that message, and I'm going to see that activity coming up on my screen here. So I see that Brandon has that chat tab open, and then they can reply back, and I'm going to see that activity coming in both on their activity here on the left and over here on the right-hand side. So it looks like Brandon's doing all right. I can message them back, but I see that they have already navigated away from the chat. So I'm going to just go ahead and close out that student tile, brings it right back here in line with everything else. All right, the chat is available for one-on-one chatting, one teacher to one student, the student to the teacher. It can be initiated by the student or by the teacher. If you have a co-teacher, either of you will be able to chat with that student. They're going to be able to see those messages coming in from the co-teacher and from you. So they will know the message is from the co-teacher because they're going to have the initials of the person that sent the message. So they'll be able to figure that out. Oh, love that. Charlotte said, the good thing about this is I can type in the box for my students who can't keep up with typing. Love that idea. So if there is some typing that needs to be done, what a great idea. You can go ahead and put that text into the chat. Then the student just needs to copy paste it. Thank you for that tip. All right. So that is chatting from the student tile. Now in the lower right-hand corner, we also have a chat icon down here as well. If you click on that one, it's going to open up a right side panel. And I kind of like this view better because when I have this right side chat open, I still have visibility to see what all of my students are browsing here on the left. And I can open up that chat conversation here on the right and message that student. I can also jump back to my chat list and open up another student chat and send them out a message as well. So this is a really, really nice way to bounce between chat conversations among several different students. And if a student reaches out to you through the chat, you're going to see that message come through. So I see an indication right up here by Brandon's name that they sent me a message. I can see it right here to the right of chat, down here at the bottom. And I see on Brandon's tile that they are again active on that chat. So I can come and respond back to them on this side panel or on the student tile. So I love opening up those lines of communication through that chat. Now I'm going to head back to my right side chat, and I want to show you this feature right up here in the top right corner. It's a little bit of a hidden feature, so tiny up here. This megaphone represents our announcement feature, our announcement option. Now chat, again, two-way communication between the student and the teacher. It does not allow student to student chatting. The announcement is a broadcast out to the entire class. So as a teacher, if I need to send out a message to my entire class, I can click on this megaphone icon. I can format that message and click on send announcement. This is a really nice way to communicate out maybe a reminder to the class, the details of the assignment, maybe a 5-minute warning that they need to start wrapping things up, or in this case, my objectives. When you send it out, your students are going to see that message coming through as a pop-up on their screen. They're going to have to click on got it to acknowledge receiving that message to get back to browsing. All right, we've covered a lot of information so far, and I want to give you the opportunity to start trying things out. So I am going to put a URL up on the screen. This is our sandbox environment. This is outside of GoGuardian Teacher. So if you don't have an account set up or you don't have students that are active right now, you can click on the link in the chat or type in this short link. It is case sensitive, so all lowercase, and it's going to bring you to Figma. This is our demo environment or our sandbox environment. And we've got some different commands that you can try out for GoGuardian. So on the left-hand side, I've got my menu. If you're not seeing that menu, click on this box here in the top left corner to open that up. And we've got some different flows that you can try out. The very first one is sending out announcements. So that one is selected. Here on the right-hand side is an example of a class with some active students, a very small class. We only have 4 students. So the first thing you need to do to send out an announcement is make sure your chat is toggled on. So that's why we've got that red flashing button right here. I'm going to toggle on the chat. In the lower right-hand corner, we need to open up our right side chat. And now we've got that right side chat open. I've got my students listed. My name would be right up here at the top, and to the right of your name, that's where you're looking for that megaphone icon to open up that send announcement to class. From here, you can format your announcement. In this demo environment, it's going to pre-populate with an announcement for you, and you'll click on Send Announcement. Now you can see all of my students are viewing that announcement. Going back to that left menu, I'm going to go to Announcement Student to see what this looks like for my students. So on that student screen, this is going to be a large image in front of anything else that they're browsing. They're going to have to click on Got It to acknowledge receiving that message to get back to browsing. All right, this environment, this Figma website is available to you right now. It's available to you after the session is over. So if you want to try things out, play around with some of our other flows here, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to jump back into our presentation and let's talk about our reporting options here in GoGuardian. Okay, so as you are running your session, when you are monitoring students, GoGuardian is collecting all of that browsing data. We've got a few ways for you to see that data. So one option is to head over to the timeline view. So we're on our screens view right now. This is showing us what our students are browsing in the moment. But if we go to the timeline view, we're going to see our student browsing for the entire class session. My student roster is listed on the left. On the right-hand side, I have an icon representing what my students are currently actively browsing. And then every student has an activity timeline moving across the page, representing what they have browsed throughout the session. From here, you can click and hold and drag and go back even to the beginning of your class session to see what students have been browsing, all of those, that little trail of activity throughout that class time. So right here, let's look at David. It looks like David started out on Khan Academy. I recognize that icon, but if you ever don't recognize something, you can just click on that bar in the timeline, and it's going to show you what they were browsing and how much time they spent on that website. From there, they opened up a Google Doc. They were there for about 2 minutes. And then we probably all recognize this one. Then they jumped into YouTube. Clicking on that, I can see that they were listening to Justin Bieber for a minute. Following that, went back to that document. So I can follow that breadcrumb trail and see the students' browsing activity throughout my entire class session. Now, this timeline view is a really nice view for you as a teacher because we don't want you to feel like you've got to be tied to your computer every time you're using GoGuardian Teacher. You want to be up and about, moving around the classroom. You can have this up on your desktop. You could project this on your smart board or on your projector screen. And at a glance, you can see if the students are on the website that they need to be on. It doesn't show the details of what they are doing or exactly what they're browsing, but at a glance, I can see right here, Baran and Bianca are on Khan Academy where they're supposed to be. Brandon and Chris are on that NASA website. But then I've got questions about some of these other students. So I could give them a verbal prompt, or I could come back over to my device, click on that 3 dot, and I could open a tab from here to get them on the website they need to be on. So that is our timeline view. To the right of timeline, that is where you're going to find any screenshots that you've captured during this session. And we also can find these screenshots in our student reports. So maybe you have a particular student that you want to dig in a little deeper on and see how that student has been spending their time online. Or you might have a conference coming up with their parent and you want to pull some information, some data about how that student has been using their time online. You can click on Student Report, choose one of your classes. From that roster, you can choose one of your students, and then you can choose a day or a date range and generate a report. This report is going to give you detailed information about what websites the student has visited during this class, during the time range specified. So I'm going to see their top 5 websites documents, and Google searches. I'll see how often I've supported that student by opening or closing tabs for them, how often I have locked their browsing or disabled their browsing, and how many times they have attempted to access websites that are blocked by our organization filters. Right below that, here are all of the screenshots I've captured during that specified time range. I also get a detailed browsing history, every website, document, or Google search that student browsed. I can copy those URLs or jump into those websites as needed. We do also have the ability to email out or share that report. You can choose the parts of the report you want to include and provide some messaging right here. All right. Love that. Use the timeline feature to double check cheating during online assessments. That's a great use case there. How'd you get to the timeline view? So let me go back to my classroom. That screens view is showing us what our students are browsing right now. Timeline view shows you what they have been browsing throughout your entire session, as well as what they are currently browsing. Does this report go away when you open a new session? No, it doesn't. So right here, I am viewing my math session. That's the only session that I have running right now. But even if I toggle away, that session is still going. It's still collecting data until the time runs out. Remember, I set the duration of that session. So it's going to keep collecting that data until the time runs out. Now, let's say I want to go ahead and start my next class session a little bit early. I can go ahead and set the duration and start this class. And now up here in the top right, I am currently viewing the class that I just started, but the math class is still going. It's going to keep going for 29 more minutes unless I choose to come in and end that session. So as a teacher, you can monitor more than one class at the same time. You just toggle back and forth between those two classes. As a student, they can be monitored in more than one class at the same time. So you don't really have to worry about starting your class a little bit early or maybe running it a little past the bell, because that next teacher is still going to be able to start that class. You'll notice that Brandon here is on my math class roster. Brandon is also a member of this English class. So the student can be monitored by more than one teacher. Now, let's say you collected all of this browsing data, but you were working with independent groups of students, you were moving around the classroom, you didn't really have your eyes on that session data, or like that teacher said, hey, I want to go back and look at the timeline view to make sure my students stayed on that website for that test. You can click on your Classrooms button here on the left-hand side, and you can click on that classroom tile, and it's going to take you into a sessions list. Now, let's say the test was Wednesday during this 3:30 to 4:18 class session. I can click on this link, and it's going to take me into the timeline view for this class session. Now, because this session is over, it's in the past, that timeline is static, but I can still drag through to see all of the activity throughout that session. I can click on a student's timeline and see what they were browsing. I can see the other websites they had open in the background. All right, looks like a few comments came in. Yes, it does work with PCs. Depending on how your organization has things set up, you can set it up to work with Chromebooks, MacBooks, PC desktops, or laptops. We also have an iPad app now. So we work on all of those different devices, depending on how your organization has chosen to set things up. All right. Now, we do have a little bit more time left, so I would love to show you one of my very favorite features. Kind of came to mind when that person was talking about looking for test fidelity, making sure students stayed on that testing website, stayed on the website they needed to be on for testing. You do have the ability to limit your students' access when they are in your class by using scenes. On the left-hand side in that menu, you're going to see scenes. And from here, you have the ability to set up these environments. You can set up an allowed website list or a blocked website list. So thinking about testing, I would probably use an allowed website list because this is going to allow you to curate a list of websites that the students in your class session are allowed to access, and everything else is going to be blocked. We see this used a lot on tests and quizzes, but you could definitely use it in a class project or an assignment when you know exactly what your students need access to. So you can see I've got a few scenes created already, but you do have to create these scenes before you can use them. So the first thing you're going to do is click on Create List and give that list a name. So this is going to be my English test. So when you create your scenes, you can use them with any of your classes. So this one is going to be specifically for my English class. I can also assign a color to it, and then I'm ready for the next step. So up here in the top right, I'm going to move on to next. And now I'm going to create a list of websites that my students can access when they're testing in my English class. So my students are going to be testing on Edulastic. You can do a keyword search, or you can paste in a URL. So I just typed Edulastic, click search. I've got a couple of results here at the top. I'm going to add both of those to the list of allowed websites. Now I've got some other results. These are other websites that commonly are added when people are adding Edulastic. So I can add any of these that I want to as well. And then you do have the ability to automatically open these for your students. So this is going to be that auto open tab for your students when that scene is in place. So let's automatically open a couple of those. I also have a Google form I want to open. Paste in the link to the form and search. There is my form. I'll add that, and let's automatically open that as well. GoGuardian is suggesting that maybe I want to allow them to sign into their Google account just in case they need to access that form. So I'll go ahead and take that recommendation. All right, let me go ahead and save this, but you can add as many websites as you need to. It may just be one, it may be several. I'll save that. Here is that ELA test right down at the bottom of my list. And now let's hop into that English class. Here in the top right corner, no scene applied means my organization filters are in place, keeping my students safe and away from harmful websites. But as a teacher, I don't have any extra limits in place. To do that, I'm going to go to that drop down. I'm going to see all of the scenes that I've created. Here is that one for my ELA test. When I select it, I get that scene listed right up here at the top, letting me know which scene I have in place. And then my students are going to begin to be redirected to the websites that I automatically opened up for them. So I can see that the form is opened up here on the left. On the right-hand side, I can see the websites that I automatically opened. And then I can see other websites the student had open previously. And I have the ability to unblock them for class. So right now, the tab is open, but the student can't access that website because it's blocked by the scene that I have in place. If I discover that there is a website that my students actually do need access to, that I forgot to add to my list, I can choose Unblock for Class and add another website to my scene. When we are finished testing, I can go back to the dropdown and disable that scene. That scene is still here. It's available for me to use with any of my classes, but it is not in place right now. It's ready and waiting for the next time we're testing. All right, looks like a couple of questions came in. Can you push out a website and then enter a session code for all of the students? Oh, good question. So what I would probably do is put, like the suggestion came through about students having a hard time typing, maybe go ahead and put that code in the chat. I don't think you're going to be able to sign in for those students, but you could try to sign into code.org and then copy the URL after you've signed in and paste it. I don't know if that would automatically sign your students in. Can you add to the allowed list in real time? Yes, you can. So that is what I just did here. In real time, what you would have to do is if a student was attempting to access something that is blocked by the scene that you have in place, then you're going to unblock it for class. So there's not a way for you as a teacher to say, oh, I forgot to add code.org and add it here. You'd have to have a student attempting to access it, and then you can choose unblock for class and add that to the scene that you have in place. All right. So we also have under our scenes, the blocked website list. And this is kind of the opposite. From here, you can come in and create a list of websites that you know are distractions for your students, websites they normally have access to, but you want to prevent them from accessing them in your class. So you build out that scene here. And then you have the ability to, put that website or that scene in place for your students to limit those distracting websites for them. Now, when you have that scene in place, you're going to have the ability to block things out for your class. So if you see your students on something that is distracting or off task, you can choose to block that website for your class, and it's going to block it out for all of the students, adding it to that scene, that list. All right, let's see. If you assigned a test using a link on their Canvas, would that be the only thing open in your scene? So the only thing open in your scene is going to be determined by what you have on your allowed list and whether or not you auto open it. So right here, even though I didn't automatically open it, if a student navigated to this website, they would have access to it. So if you want your students to access the website, you're going to add it to the list. If you don't want them to access it, you don't. Now with Canvas in mind, if you want them to have access to Canvas, you're going to have to go ahead and allow Canvas. And then if there are links within that Canvas assignment that they need access to, you're going to also have to add that access as well. But basically, whatever you list here on your allowed website list is what they are allowed to access. Now, one more thing that I want to show you, we do have a brand new feature, just a couple of weeks old, and that is the ability to share your scenes. So if you work with a group of teachers, you have a team or a PLC, and somebody has created a website list that you want to share with other teachers. So maybe I created this one for my ELA testing, and I want to share it with my other ELA teachers. I can go to the three-dot menu, and I can share that scene through email or by sharing and giving them that link. Now, the really nice thing about sharing is when I share my scene, they can use it, but they can't modify or change my scene. So this one right here was shared with me by my friend Liz. So if I want to edit it, that's grayed out. I can make a copy and then make changes or modifications to my copy of it, but I can't change Liz's copy of that scene. So if it was shared with you, you're going to see that. And if you shared it with others, you're going to see that as well. All right. Can you push out scenes for specific students? Absolutely. That is one of our advanced features. So let me go here into my classes. You can select students and apply a scene to just the students that you've selected. So that is one of our commands down here at the bottom. So maybe Brandon and Chris are doing a makeup test. I can go here to apply scene. From the drop down, I can choose that scene and apply it to those students, and only those students will get that scene. Can we auto open and have a block list? For example, I want to auto open Google Meet. but also block gaming sites. Yes. So back here on scenes, on that blocked website list, let me jump into this one. You do have that auto open option here. So if I wanted Google Classroom to automatically open, I can update that scene, and right down here, I can see that I do have one website that's going to auto open when I put that scene in place, that blocked website scene. So auto open is available there as well. All right, that's it. We're at the end of our time. I am so glad I got the time to come and speak with all of you today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this was helpful. Did you learn something that you didn't know before? Did you learn something you're excited to use with your students? I hope so. Thank you. I hope you had a productive day at this conference. Thanks for taking time out of your Saturday to join me. Have a great rest of your weekend, a great rest of your day, and have a great Thanksgiving holiday.
Thank you so much. You too.
All right. Bye, everyone.